Looks like there will be no more World of Peacecraft and the entire Horde and the Alliance merging into one faction that it was going until now. This has been foreshadowed for a long time, but this is no random interview or just my opinion or speculation. We have outright data and questlines from the Midnight Beta where we not have one, but we have two setups for outright skirmishes and the start of actual faction conflict. The Light Army has literally occupied Silvermoon, they're just outright arresting Elven leaders, and the Alliance Paladins are not so well received, which will lead potentially into a new battleground. However, we now have the Void manipulating Horde and Alliance characters in Voidstorm to start battling each other in the first outright faction battle since BFA. So what is going on, what will the new faction conflict look like, and what is everything we know? So, if you followed my channel for a while now, you might remember that I have talked about the upcoming faction war nearly 2 years ago, as Blizzard actually hinted that this will be happening in the World Soul Saga. At the time, they told us we shouldn't expect the BFA 2.0, but the Horde and the Alliance peace is eventually going to fall apart, and we should end up in a situation as it was around Classic, where sometimes we collaborate, but we're not exactly allies. Looks like they were completely right on that one. Just to get you up to speed on the timeline, they doubled down on this right now when Midnight was announced. Like a few days after the announcement, we had the official interview where they started saying the same thing and how we should expect a lot of faction friction throughout Midnight. Now, to not speculate here, I'll talk about vague interviews. I want to cover a few scenarios we already have in the Midnight Beta where we can see the very start of the faction conflict. I'm not saying it's an all-out war yet, but we already have one scenario from the opening storyline and one from the Voidstorm area where the faction conflict is really beginning to happen. I personally don't know how to even rate this, as on one hand it is actually really stupid, as we literally have this crazy ancient void demon trying to destroy us all, so we are now doing just random faction wars. But at the same time, I do feel like the faction piece has kinda made the story and the game a little bit boring. Like, honestly, by the way it was going around in Dragonflight, a lot of us were seriously considering that the factions are not even going to be a thing anymore, as we have essentially almost merged. The entire Alliance versus Horde dynamic is one of the pillars of this game that made it popular in the first place. This like rivalry and conflict and PvP is literally like half of this game, so Blizzard diluting this kind of made the game lose a little bit of its edge. However, opinions aside, I want to show you what we have learned in the beta and how faction peace is officially ending. So the first part is actually a thing I covered in the previous video on the channel, where the Light Army literally occupies Silvermoon. Check out the previous video for detailed information on this, but this is the gist of it. So Liadrin summoned a bunch of Azeroth Paladins in the Light Army to protect the Sunwell, as you could see in the Midnight Announcement cinematic, and in this process she also summoned a bunch of Alliance Paladins to defend. Now, the Light Army didn't come in as this angel army to defend the poor elves. They literally came on their own authority and leadership, and very quickly, like pretty much right out the gate, they started completely disregarding Lord Tamar and everything he has to say. They started taking the Blood Elven weapons and property. They literally started just outright arresting prominent Blood Elves on their own authority, acting as a police force. Furthermore, 2/3 of Silvermoon is neutral, aka taken by the Light Army. Based on the dialogues and happenings already at the start of Midnight, it is clear the Light Army has really outstayed their welcome in Silvermoon, but they don't really have any plans to leave. I mean, some Blood Elves are saying these guys are as bad as Arthas and his Scourge. Now, here's the thing, while this is the Light Army, Drelian is also an Alliance character. He has brought a whole bunch of Alliance figures here as well. As Blizzard already told us in the post-announcement interview, the Alliance Paladins are going to start causing problems. As they're risking their lives, they feel like they're owed something, and eventually it is said that they will start protesting, causing riots, which could lead into a new battleground and the start of outright faction war. This is kind of the beginning of the end for the Horde and the Alliance peace that has lasted for a while now. Now, the premise is that individuals are getting out of hand and the leadership wants to keep the cooperation, but in this scenario, it is also the leaders doing these crazy things. I mean, Drelian is outright disrespecting Lord Tamar, one of the Horde leaders, and the other higher-ups are causing problems as well, which could cause the Horde to push back on the leadership level. However, the faction conflict actually continues and looks like the peace is breaking on all ends. We actually have a new scenario from the beta in the other zone of Voidstorm where the Horde and the Alliance start outright just fighting each other. After these two, I don't think there is much going back. So, quick backstory in this area, it is actually the Void that is pushing the conflict, and obviously, I mean, it is in their interest for us to fight each other so that the defense of Azeroth is weakened. We have these Dominar figures, these are very powerful Void Lords, and I'll probably cover that in a different video, but these are some of the most powerful Void beings, and we know they battle each other, just like how the old gods battle each other, like the Void constantly fights amongst themselves. But these guys are also sinister, and they like going to different planets, taking people from them, having them fight in arenas for entertainment, and also, of course, they enjoy attacking worlds in their free time. What we've learned is that until recently, Azeroth has actually been off limits for them, but all that changed when Xal'atath overthrew their rule and became the true leader of the Void. Now, these guys have been fully unleashed. So we ran into two of them in Voidstorm, Zidon and Vidias, which is like these two ancient rivals that constantly battle each other in various forms, and as soon as they came to Azeroth, they took a really keen interest in the Horde and Alliance conflict, and they started singling out those hurt by the faction conflict the most and started feeding their need for revenge. So the Horde and the Alliance manipulated allies directly with these guys, and we start battling amongst ourselves. The Alliance character says, war or no war, there are those of us that just don't forgive. The Alliance leaders want peace, they don't listen to our calls for vengeance, but we will take the fight into our own hands. On the other hand, these guys have also found someone hot-headed on the Horde side, and this is an orc where he says the faction leaders don't sanction this conflict, they forbid the Alliance and the Horde war. However, while the orcs are now in the modern times speaking in a council and counting votes, throughout their history they used to speak in the field of battle, and the leaders can't control everything. So this is a bit of a localized faction conflict manipulated by the Void in the zone that is obviously, when combined with the Silvermoon situation, going to start causing serious problems later down the line in faction relations. Personally, I think this is going to be just a start, and that we will see more and more of these skirmishes and localized problems, and the Void is obviously going to fuel it as much as possible in order to accomplish their invasion. However, I also don't think this is going to descend into an all-out war. I think someone like Anduin is going to step up later down the line to get us to focus on the Void, and Blizzard will just use these skirmishes as fuel for PvP content for this expansion and to keep the entire Alliance versus Horde dynamic interesting. However, it could actually turn out to be interesting. I mean, keep in mind, despite the cooperation and everything, the Horde and the Alliance had a massive conflict relatively recently, which, while it was manipulated by outside forces, it was also never fully resolved, and there are a lot of victims of this that have not really forgotten what had happened. But as I said, I do think for a while it is going to start getting worse and worse, and I think it might be interrupted just before it erupts into an all-out war. Depending on how Blizzard pulls this off, it could be a good way to spice up the entire Warcraft storyline, and maybe it won't be all about friendship, councils, and working together. Thanks for watching. Check out all the details of what actually happened in Silvermoon by clicking on the screen. I got a full video on that, and also check out my video on Greek mythology and the Titans that I've recorded live on site in Italy by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time!